Welcome to the Every Night is Game Night preview series, the show where designers and publishers share their passion and answer critical questions about their Kickstarter projects. If you're on the fence about a pledge, this is the show for you.
ENGN Preview Series, Episode 31, Fantastic Factories, with the designer, Joseph Chen. Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to the Every Night is Game Night Preview Series. I'm your host, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us. And this week, we are happy to have a creator who is launching his very first game here on Kickstarter. So I'm so happy. Obviously I love talking about all sorts of games in the gaming sphere. We're going to talk to, AJ from Van Ryder Games. We're going to talk to all these kind of established people. But it's nice to just kind of take a step back and join someone on their journey as they're launching their first game. Really looking forward to this. So we have for you the game Fantastic Factories and the creator of this game, Joseph Chen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right. So you have launched Fantastic Factories. It is funded. You must be really excited.
Oh, yeah. The amount of people who came out to support it was overwhelming. A lot more people than I thought. I think we funded in the first 5 hours of launching. And, it's crazy because I was looking at, my mailing list, what I thought my reach was. And I thought I'd be happy to, fund a few days in. And somehow we funded within 5 hours, so it's been crazy.
Once we finish talking about the game, I'm going to ask you for some secret sauce recipes for getting a Kickstarter funded so fast. But before we get to all that, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself. You said that you were a software engineer from Seattle. Actually, a little bit of behind the wall stuff. We did start the podcast, and we had to stop it. So this is take two. So I have to kind of reset myself a little bit.
It does feel familiar.
So go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background in gaming and how you got into designing your first game.
Yeah, so I've been a gamer at heart for a long time, mostly video games, and then shortly after college, I got into hobby gaming, kind of board games, the same way I think a lot of people do. We started off with Catan, then graduated to Dominion and Seven Wonders and a few other games. And then kind of took a little bit of hiatus because I moved away from, I used to live with a bunch of roommates, and then eventually moved in with my then girlfriend and got engaged and got married and did that whole thing. And eventually a group of friends and I decided, let's do a project, just a hobby to kind of occupy our time. And we decided that we were going to try to design a board game. We figured, can't be that hard. Pieces of paper, pen. We played a bunch of games. Well, at the time we thought it was a bunch of games. Now that I'm deep into the hobby, it's insane to see how many games there were. But we were giving it a go, and we kind of got together, decided what mechanics we wanted in the game. We designed it. We each actually made our own design, brought it to a game night where we just play each other's design, and mine kind of took off, and I kept working on it, iterating, and, here we are, 2.5 years later on Kickstarter now.
Mm-hmm. All right. Very cool. So here comes Fantastic Factories. So is this out of your professional, kind of software engineering background, or, tell me what the overlap is. I see the overlap. I think there's an overlap there, but maybe you can kind of explain it to me a little bit, how this kind of came about.
There's, some overlap in the sense that I think a lot of software engineers do enjoy board gaming, kind of the analytical side of things. There is certainly, I think for my style of games, I tend towards Euro-style games that are a little bit more thinky, I guess. And that's kind of my background, my preference to games. Also way back in the day in high school and college, I dabbled a little bit in graphic design as well. And so I do the graphic design and the art as well for Fantastic Factories. Mm-hmm. And I think it really helps kind of having this analytical background also for just figuring out the balance of the game, kind of the numbers, and the distribution of cards, things like that. But in general, I think a lot of that experience just comes from trial and error and just playing board games. I think that a lot of people might think designing a board game is challenging, and it is, but it's something that's quite easy to get into. You might not be an excellent board game designer right away, but it's one of those things that a skill that you can hone and you can grow and polish and master eventually.
All right. So maybe give us a little bit of an overview. What are we getting into if we're playing Fantastic Factories?
Well, it's a dice placement engine building game for 1 to 5 players. It plays under an hour. So the goal of the game is to build sets of factories that work well together in order to manufacture as many goods as possible. So there's really 2 kind of parts of the game. Discovering these combinations of factories to kind of formulate your engine to manufacture as many goods as possible. And then the dice placement. You're rolling dice and using the dice as workers to work at these factories. The thing is, these factories require different kinds of workers. Some require a matching pair or a specific value like a 6. And there are also training facilities that let you manipulate your dice rolls. So you don't get stuck with the dice rolls that you get. And so it's kind of this miniature puzzle each turn to figure out where to place all your workers in order to maximize your turn.
Okay, cool. So I observe 2 different phases, right? So there's that market phase where you buy cards, and then there's that kind of implementing what you're buying. So let's start with the market phase first. So the market phase cards uses the multi-use cards, right? And you mentioned that you liked Race for the Galaxy. Was that part of the inspiration, the multi-use cards, or was there some other influences there?
Yeah, so market phase is where players take turns taking cards, and I think it's the main source of interaction within the game. Race for Galaxy is definitely an inspiration in the sense that there's this engine building aspect where you're trying to find all the right pieces that work well with your particular strategy, and there's a lot of different strategies to pursue. And the multi-use cards allow for a lot of these kind of player collisions where you might be picking a card someone else needs. Because each card has multiple uses, the chances of you potentially picking a card someone needs becomes a little higher, and you can potentially counterpick cards out in the marketplace based on what kind of needs other players have and what you want as well. So the fact that you can discard cards as a resource to build other cards or hire contractors kind of opens up the possibilities.
So then you have that market phase where you kind of implement stuff, and then it goes to the dice rolling and the worker phase. That reminded me of Alien Frontiers. So is that
definitely
Yep.
that I would say if you just say this is a mashup between 2 different games, it would be Alien Frontiers and Race for the Galaxy.
I got it. Yes, I did it.
So yeah, during the work phase, there is the dice placement kind of aspect where you're trying to match dice or figure out where to place your dice. But in Alien Frontiers, you have a board, and everyone's contending for the same spots, and the spots are always the same every game. In Fantastic Factories, you're building your own tableau of factories. So everyone's got their own factories they're building. So every person's strategy is going to evolve in a different way. And placing dice, it depends on your play style. Some people like kind of manipulating your dice. Some people hate relying on dice, so they'll build out parts of their engine that rely less heavily on specific values of dice. And the cool part about the work phase is actually it all happens simultaneously. Everyone's actually taking this part of the turn at the same time. And that's something that can really cut down on player downtime. And I think that's one of the flaws, or one of the problems of Alien Frontiers is towards the end of the game, you've got 6 dice, you've got all these alien artifacts that can manipulate your dice rolls, and you're just trying to squeeze out that last settlement or whatever they're called, colonies.
The little things in the moon that you have to put on.
I like to call them little poops because I have the old version that doesn't have like the little space bubble ones. They look like little poops. Anyways,
Okay.
but towards the end of the game, the turns can take a really long time. 5-10 minutes sometimes, depending on how analysis paralysis driven players can be. And so Fantastic Factories kind of helps mitigate that issue by having players take this particular phase at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is basically kind of an upgraded Alien Frontiers, the card game, if we can kind of put it in like an idea. And people don't know Alien Frontiers. It's kind of one of those, I guess it's one of those granddaddy type games of the modern board gaming era. It was the very first Kickstarter. It uses dice as workers. I think it was pretty much the first game that did that. And we're talking like 2011, 2012, somewhere around there. So really, really kind of old tech and really awesome for what it was. But if you play it now, and it is available on an app if you just wanted to, if you were curious, if you want to do it right now, it does show its age. And I do think that there's room for, like you were saying before, there's not a lot to do kind of outside your turn. And, there's a lot of waiting around. Sounds like you've addressed these particular criticisms very directly with your design.
Because I definitely enjoy Alien Frontiers, but basically the goal of when we kind of were trying to design these games was take all these mechanics that we liked from all of our favorite games, mash it into one game, and try to eliminate these downsides of all these different games, which surprisingly is actually quite difficult to do. There's a lot of kind of give and take, when you highlight this part of the game, this other part of the game becomes much more difficult to design. The kind of simultaneous nature of the work phase is inherently non-interactive. And so all this sorts of interaction comes from the marketplace.
Okay, so that's kind of how you figured it out, because there is no real marketplace phase in Alien Frontiers. You're just kind of like doing stuff, but so that's where the Race for the Galaxy element comes in, because that game's all interaction. It's all like what do I do in what phases and all that kind of stuff. So that sounds really cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the game has a solo mode. Tell us about the solo mode.
Yeah, so because of the kind of almost solitary nature of the game, where the interaction is largely on marketplace, the game actually lends itself quite well to a solo mode. And I'm a big believer that games should scale well with player counts. The game experience should feel very similar regardless of what player count, including with one player. A lot of games will kind of do this beat this score kind of mode, but I wanted it to feel like you're actually competing against another player. Mm-hmm. And so during the work phase, you're doing all the same stuff you would do in a multiplayer game, kind of figuring out the puzzle of where to place your workers, what buildings to build. And then what I call the machine, the AI, takes a turn. And the machine simulates a very basic engine, an opponent, because no one wants to be managing like an opponent for like 5-10 minutes each time, and making decisions for the AI. So the AI makes all its decisions for you. You roll 5 dice, and depending on the die roll, it decides which parts of the engine it's building and which parts of the engine score points. Mm-hmm. So it simulates a player, but you don't have to manage it as if it were a player. It just approximates what a player would do in terms of disrupting your marketplace and picking up speed. So you feel like you're actively kind of fighting against another opponent. And so it actually, in a lot of ways, feels like you're playing a 2-player game without needing that second player.
Mm-hmm. But it's not like a bot necessarily that you have to automate. It's just kind of like this ghost opposition. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, there's a little operation in the sense that, like, okay, well, they roll the 4 on the green die, so they build this particular building. And then the rest of the die rolls decide how many points they score. So there's no, like, big decision tree, like, I have to look at the flow chart to see exactly what they do. It's just basically one simple die roll, and then a couple things happen, and then that's it.
All right. Very cool. So yeah, that seems to be in terms of the basic stuff about Fantastic Factories. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about, I guess, the project overall, what backers are buying into when they're backing your project?
Well, yeah. So for people who have looked at the campaign, it's unusual in a few different ways. I think atypical of a lot of Kickstarter campaigns, partially because of a little bit of my philosophy on how I think Kickstarter campaigns should be run, and the fact that it's also our first project. So we wanted to keep it simple. We don't have a lot of complex add-ons. We don't have a deluxe version. We just have just the game, and that's kind of what you get. And all our stretch goals are also component upgrades only, and no content. Because Justin and I, our philosophy is that we want to provide a game that's complete and that has all the parts you need to play the game in the best way possible. A lot of Kickstarters will offer extra cards as stretch goals. We thought that was kind of weird because it kind of begs the question, are these cards part of the game or are they not? Did you play test them or not?
Yeah. It's
so
like, it's shady on both ends, right? So like if it was content that you always meant to be there, then why not just include it? Why stretch this out? And if it was content that's extra, then is this tested and all that kind of stuff? So it's like, we had Keith Mateka on the podcast. It'll be this past Friday as we launch this pod. And he was just kind of talking about there's like a fundamental dishonesty when it comes to stretch goals. When it comes to like content driven stretch goals, and he mentioned that, and I'm like, I guess that's right. And you guys are bought into that.
Yeah, I agree. So like it feels a little not so transparent to our backers. So we decided that we're including all the content from day one. Some people offer a solo mode as a stretch goal, or a 5th player expansion as a stretch goal. Well, I guess 5th player expansion makes sense because there's added components. But we include all of that stuff from day one. Solo mode was released. The rule book was released. We have the game on Tabletop Simulator for people to play. We want the game to stand on its own for its gameplay and not for the stretch goals or the shiny minis or anything like that. And so we've kept all our stretch goals component upgrades only to kind of stay focused on that gameplay. And so far, I think it's been received pretty well. And the thing also is we're not dangling each stretch goal. Like a lot of people will pace themselves, release a stretch goal every 3 days and make sure there's always a stretch goal just beyond the current funding level.
Right.
Our last stretch goal is at 100,000, and we're on track to hit that in about 3 or 4 days. After that, there's no other planned stretch goals, so we're going to be fully stretched with 10 more days left to go. And that I think that's unusual for a lot of campaigns because there's the belief that we have to always dangle this carrot in front of the backers to keep them motivated, and I think that's also a little misleading. And I hope that our backers can see the reason why we no longer have any stretch goals, because the game is as good as it can be. We don't have to add in some gimmicky magnetic clasp to the box or something that would affect our production schedule. And so I think that's just it's the goal is to get the game to as many hands as possible, and I think that means keeping the price point as low as possible without including a lot of kind of excessive things that you kind of see in a lot of Kickstarter campaigns. And the cool thing is that because we've released the print and play and ways to play online for free, a lot of our backers have played the game. And they, just today I had people telling me, like tweeting at me like, hey, I tried the solo mode. It was great. I lost by a couple points. And a lot of people who have gone through the effort of printing out the game and playing it, which I think is really awesome. And I think I'm glad that people are playing the game and enjoying it.
So you did fund in 5 hours. What that tells me is that it requires a fair bit of legwork ahead of time to get the word out and kind of prime the pump a little bit. Was that a part of the process of you launching the Kickstarter and being able to get the word out so effectively?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's probably where a lot of the software engineering side kind of comes in. Not just from the fact that I can code, but also the analytical perspective and the fact that I've worked at these companies that have multidisciplinary teams that are focused on, understanding marketing, how to generate leads, things like that. And the thing is, we've been working on the game for 2.5 years, so it's actually quite a good amount of time to build an audience. We ended up having to redesign a few parts of the game to make sure we had the best game possible. And I think building that audience is really important for Kickstarter. A lot of people will launch a game thinking the audience will come to them, but you have to bring your own audience. And throughout those 2.5 years, maybe not from the very beginning, but we've been collecting emails, kind of building the audience, bringing it to as many game shops and meetups as possible. And it is a lot of work. It's a lot of legwork, and it's funny that, you know, right up until you launch the Kickstarter, you actually have no idea how effective your efforts have been. You know, you've been spending the last 2.5 years of your life doing this, and you're like, well, I hope we fund, you know, and it's really rewarding to see all that work pay off in such a big way. And for people who want more specific details, I actually maintain a blog that actually detail a lot of the kind of all these aspects of game design and publishing. You know, my blog actually covers all kinds of things. It's whatever kind of problem I'm dealing at the time. And some of my more recent posts talk about how to build an audience for Kickstarter, the analytics behind building traffic and where all the traffic is coming from, things like that.
Where can we find this blog? It's
on Medium. So if you just search Medium and Fantastic Factories, you should be able to find it.
All right, so I think that that just about wraps it up for all our questions. So this is a really fun project. Like you were saying before, like the game is cute. We're talking Alien Frontiers, the card game. I think, you know, also I forgot to mention like Kingsburg. There's a little family of like dice worker placement games that, you know, we're always looking for the cleanest one. We're always looking for the one with the least downtime and just like the fewest wrinkles. Not a lot of it, for whatever reasons, it doesn't get a lot of love. And it sounds like you've taken a stab at it, and from the reception, it sounds like it, you know, a lot of positive feedback there. So that's awesome. So if that sounds good to you, if that sounds good to, like, you know, just like a quick, but with a decent strategy, you know, using dice as workers, all that kind of stuff, evocative of those other games, this might be worth a back for you. So is that besides the blog, is there anywhere else that we can catch you? Does Metafactory Games have its own contact and website and everything?
Well, a lot of the audience building has been around the Fantastic Factories brand. So I actually have a pretty active Twitter. You can find me on Twitter as @FanFactories, and then you can find us on Facebook as well as Fantastic Factories, and Instagram. And I'm trying to think of anywhere else. There we have a website as well, but for now it actually just points to the Kickstarter, but fantasticfactories.com.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. Good luck with the rest of the campaign.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's going to do it for another episode of the Every 90s Game Night Preview Series. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you enjoyed our little trip through Fantastic Factories. On a personal level, I never got a chance to play it, so I really would have liked to ask a couple of more questions specific to the gameplay. But, you know, I don't have infinite amounts of time as much as I would want to. Alien Frontiers is actually really one of my favorite games, as is Race for the Galaxy. So I'm really looking forward to this. I really hope that it delivers. It will be delivering next year around April, so we'll check back in and let you know how much fun we're going to have with that. So if you want to get in touch with the show, please hit us up on the Twitter, ENGN_podcast. We have a brand spanking new Facebook group, Every Night is Game Night, www.everynightisgamenight.com, and also our geek list. Yeah, since I started advertising the geek list, a lot of folks have been coming over, not just commenting about the contest and some of the general episodes there, but getting specific, looking at each individual episode and picking out stuff that they like. I like to see that. It's a good place to start conversation, so that is very, very cool. Go ahead and visit our geek list on BGG. Anywhere, go ahead and hit us up. We'd love to contact you. One favor we ask, I'm going to ask for this every single time. Please give us a rating, 5 stars, or however many stars you think we deserve, over on the Apple Store, SoundCloud, Stitcher, all that good stuff. So that's going to do it. Later, everybody.